The obvious, there's not a single member of the United States Congress who does not have his or her constituents upset about not merely Enron, but what is raised as a consequence of Enron, of the loss of pensions, the loss of their security. In a sense, in the minds of many, the loss of their everything they've built their whole lives. And what can we do about that? There's also a larger issue. When I was chairman of this full committee, the Judiciary Committee, for years, and the ranking member for even longer, I spent a lot of time dealing with the criminal justice system and am responsible for or blamed for much of the criminal law that has been written since 1978 in the United States Congress. And one of the things that we know is that white-collar crime can be equally as devastating as other types of crime. And we also know, though, that it is very much more difficult for prosecutors to bring white-collar crime cases, that the fact of the matter is we are very, very concerned, and first and foremost concerned about violent crime in America. But when we get beyond violent crime, we sometimes tend to lose the differentiation that is needed between the impact of white-collar crime and theft, simple theft. Someone in our society, all you have to do in any society, look at their criminal code, and it will tell you what they value. It will tell you how highly they value it. In America, we value life more than anything else. So obviously, if someone wrongfully takes another person's life, maliciously and premeditatedly takes someone else's life, we have the death penalty in most places for that. Evidence the fact we hold that as the highest value, human life. If a woman is raped, we hold that as a very high value in most states, when we say there will be a severe penalty for that. If someone were to sneak into your house and steal $5,000, it is less of a penalty than if someone accosts you in the street at gunpoint and takes $5,000, because they have put you in fear. And we value our right to be free of fear. And so we have a higher penalty for robbery than we do for burglary. Now, I know this is self-evident when I say it, but I think sometimes we forget it. But the strange thing is, when it comes to those who rob us with a pen, rob us with a pencil, rob us with their financial shenanigans, they tend to go to jail less, or they steal from us, to be more precise, than someone who would steal the same amount of money from us in a circumstance where they broke into our house. The person who breaks into our house and steals $50,000 from us, or if they could steal our future by stealing our pension, would go to jail for a long, long time. Yet, white-collar crime in most states and in the federal government generally does not carry the same penalty. A very slight digression. There are those who are concerned in the corporate community with the notion of we shouldn't have all these, we should have tort reform, because taxpayers or stockholders should not be held accountable for the misdeeds of their companies in a way that causes hundreds of millions of dollars in damages. Well, I would suggest that we can have it one of two ways. You can have the tort system the way it is, or a criminal system where we lock those guys up who make those mistakes. Then no fiduciary burden placed upon anyone any stockholder, but the man or woman goes to jail. Kind of good idea, you folks with bow ties on out there. It's a good idea for you all to think about. All those of you, and like me, in suits that cost more than $100 that are sitting out front. And so the second point I want to make here is that this is about values. And so our criminal code, which I have not been the custodian of, but am one who has been an overseer of for some time, 30 years in the United States Senate, I think has to be adjusted. or we should consider whether it need be adjusted to reflect what we value. To reflect what we value. And that's what this hearing's about. Let me make it clear. Our first panel here are people who, in varying degrees, have had their future stolen from them. Not merely their money, their future stolen from them. And one of the witnesses is a person who does not sure what has been denied him. But let me make it clear. There is no proof of any criminal activity or intent on the part of either the companies whose pensions have gone up in smoke for their employees, either Medichem, which a company one gentleman, Mr. Deputy, worked for, or Enron, where two other witnesses. The reason for the first panel is it goes back to this value piece. It's for us to understand what the damages are to people who have lost their pension if there later is proof that there was a criminal intent related to their loss of damage. It's a different standard if there's negligence. It's a different standard. And that's a different issue. That's a civil system. And so I want to make it clear, by having the three people we have here today, the purpose is not to make a case that either Enron or Medichem or any other corporation has in fact violated criminal law. They may have, I don't know. But that is not the premise upon which you have been invited here. You've been invited here to tell us, just as we would and have invited victims of rape, victims of burglary, victims of robbery, victims of senior fraud, to explain to us what the consequences of losing your future, if you will, has meant to you. Now, one other point. We're going to have a series of experts to follow this panel, and I'm looking, quite frankly, to them to tell me if this discrepancy or the difference between the penalties that flow from white-collar crime generically and other crime generically should remain to the extent they exist. And if they exist and they shouldn't remain, why do they exist in the first place? Is it because we have to look at this. We have to look at, is the reason why there are not more prosecutions for white-collar crime is because it's much more difficult. And by the way, it is much more difficult. Do we have enough prosecutors? Do we have enough trained prosecutors to be able to handle these very complicated cases? If it turns out that we should, in fact, be pursuing more white-collar criminals, and we're not, we agree that we should, then we've got to figure out why we're not. And if one of the reasons we're not is we don't have the sufficient resources, we don't have enough prosecutors, we don't have enough judges, whatever it happens to be, then we should remedy that. That's my job. That's the job of the people up here. And lastly, I would point out that there has been, in my view, some progress made by the Sentencing Commission, which I am often reminded that the reason it exists is I wrote the law setting it up, and so those who dislike it very much usually remind me of that. But I think they've done a good thing here. I'm not sure, quite frankly, I'm going to ask the second panel, if they've gone far enough. In the past, the way we've dealt with the calculation of a loss and the penalty would flow from the calculation. You steal $1, the penalty is less than if you steal $1 million. The way we've calculated the loss in the past has been different than is now being proposed. In the past, the way in which we have operated is that loss not only measures the harm wrought, but also is an acceptable proxy for the defendant's state of mind. Stealing more is worse than stealing less, not only because it inflicts greater harm, but also because the defendant who steals more is often thought to have a more reprehensible state of mind than the defendant who steals little. Now, the new guidelines incorporate a much better definition of loss that takes into account the amount of harm caused by conduct. Actual loss now means, quote, the reasonably foreseeable pecuniary harm that resulted from the offense. This definition, in my view, strikes the right balance between the objective but-for standard and the subjective inquiry into the defendant's intentions. But it still leaves some questions, in my view. The Commission determined that loss should be reduced by the money returned, the fair market value of the property returned, and the services returned by the defendant. With respect to investment fraud cases, the new guidelines provide that loss shall not be reduced by the money or value of the property transferred to any individual investor in the scheme in excess of the investor's principal investment. Well, I'm not sure that should be the standard, but I want to discuss that. And so we are going to have essentially bifurcate this hearing. Again, the first part of the hearing relates to examples of what constitutes what the impact of loss of a instrument and or a thing of value, which is difficult to be stolen other than identity theft, other than being not made available because of bankruptcy, because of fraud, not the same. And so today we want to hear from the witnesses as to what they think the impact, what they know the impact has been on their lives. I'm delighted to introduce Charles Prestwood, who has traveled quite a ways from Texas to join us here today. Mr. Prestwood spent 33 and a half years at, is it BAML, B-A-M-M-E-L, BAML, Texas gas storage facility, which later became part of Enron, working his way up from maintenance to operations. Generally, he would work 12-hour shifts, commuting 75-mile round trips from his home in Conroe, in Conroe, Texas. Having been very proud to be part of the building Enron into a powerful corporation with the encouragement of the company's top brass, he invested the abundance of his earnings in Enron stock, amassing at its peak $1.3 million worth of worth. Like other employees, he was prevented from selling his investments. The company's stock value dropped last fall, and in the end, his savings dwindled to a mere $8,000. Not only will he not be able to spend his retirement traveling as he had dreamed, but he will now live in fear that if the furnace or the microwave breaks down, it's a cost that is going to be, anyway, it's a cost. It's serious. Ms. Farmer, thank you for traveling from Florida to join us today. Your son is with you. I indicated to you, I know we don't salute sergeants, but since they run the show, we show them great respect. And Sergeant, it's a delight to have you here, and looks like you got someone looking out for you, Mom. Janice Farmer spent 16 years working to build the Enron Corporation, spending the bulk of her tenure in the right-of-way department. After having been encouraged throughout her career to invest in Enron stock, she was prevented from selling her holdings as well as the market value plummeted. In turn, she saw her savings drop from $700,000 to $4,000. Is that correct? To $2,000?
20.
Well, why don't you speak up and tell me what it is?
20.
20. I'm sorry. I devalued your stock even more. I'm sorry. To $20,000. While she once dreamed of using her savings to take her children and grandchildren on trips around the globe, she is now at home at night, and that dream is somewhat distant now. Accompanying her is her son Jeffrey, a criminal investigator in the Marine Corps. Today, by the way, is his birthday, and I wish him happy birthday.
Thank you.
While I regret the circumstance that brought you both here, I want to thank you for joining us. And from my home state, I'm pleased to welcome Mr. Howard Deputy. He hails from the state of Delaware. He lives in Smyrna, Delaware, and he's worked as a welder and crane operator for Medicam and before the buyout of Standard Chlorine 11 years ago. When Medicam announced bankruptcy only weeks ago, he lost a portion of his pension, as did more than 100 union and non-union employees. His loss totaled more than $300,000. I understand that employees and management are currently negotiating, and hopefully a settlement of these claims will come forward, but Mr. Deputy joins us today to share his story. I welcome all of you. Thank you for your willingness to share your story with us. And with that, I would also, by the way, accompanying Mr. Deputy is Mr. Howard Deputy is Jeff James of Middletown, Delaware, and he also worked for Medicam for 14 years. Again, for the record, there is no evidence, there is no proof, there has been no case made, there has been no decision made by any criminal court that either of the corporations mentioned here have engaged in criminal activity or violated the criminal law. So let me begin now with you, Mr. Presswood, and I welcome your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for having the opportunity to appear in your committee. Like you stated a while ago, about the things that's really happened in our lives, we've had a 180-degree turnaround in our lives.
I hate to ask you to do this. As modern as this place is supposed to be, we're the most antiquated institution in the world. Can you pull that microphone? You got to bring it right up to your mouth. I apologize in order for people, because people in the back are straining to hear what you have to say. If you could just speak,
Okay.
Just lean in the list like I do, if you would.
That better?
That's it. You got it.
All right. Thank you, sir.
All those Texans back there understand you. Those folks in Massachusetts may need a translator. But please proceed.
Thank you, sir. But like you stated a while ago, about how this is, what kind of effect is this having on us? It's a tremendous effect. In other words, it's 180 degrees. It's a complete turnaround. Because when I retired from Enron back in October the 1st of 2000, I had plans on doing some traveling, my fiance and I. And we had plans of, doing a lot of things. See some of this good old beautiful USA, But since everything happened the way it did at Enron, I do good to stay home, And it's awful expensive even to stay home. That's like where used to, I didn't have to worry if a refrigerator, water well pump, or something like that went out. I didn't have to worry about it because I had some money to back it up, and I could replace it. Now, it's my prayer every day that everything will hang in there, until I can get better financially, but sell a little piece of property that I own or something and kind of tide over my house note. And first one thing and another. But, and when you think about the mental end of it, that is where it really hurts you. When you go to bed at night knowing what you did have, you go to bed now knowing what you don't have. In other words, it makes you real thankful for the things that you do have. But in other words, we just went back in time. There is no other way around it. We just went back in time because our lifestyle is completely changed, and the stock that we had is worthless now. And the word loyalty, right now I do have two definitions to that word. The one that I lived by for 33 and a half years, it kind of left me hanging out on a limb when I found out that the real true definition of it wasn't exactly what I was thinking. But that's just like the many things. There's one little article here I'd like to read in this little testimony here. And simply stunning. That's how Chief Executive Officer Jeff Skilling described Enron's strong financial and operating performance in 2000. Every major business, pipelines, wholesale service, retail, and broadband, turned in strong performances for the year that were reflected in record volumes, contract value, and profitability. Revenues increased 2.5 times, reaching $101 billion. For the first time, Enron's pre-tax net income exceeded $1 billion, a 32% increase over last year, and shareholders received an 89% gain on the stock price. Other significant highlights were included, for which we won't go into that, but it will be down there in the Enron business. Met with Jeff to discuss last year's results and his outlook on the year of 2001. It said, the Enron business asked a question. Enron had a great 2000. How did we do it? Jeff Skillings answered, every one of our businesses performed beyond our expectations. Well, you know, the way I look at that, if there was any truth in that, Enron would still be going strong, you know. There was something wrong somewhere along the line because, in other words, the inflated price or the process or the type or the manner of bookkeeping or whatever might have been the problem. But, you know, every time you talk to someone and you hear someone else talk, like on a committee and all, this must just be one big one dream, you know, because nobody done anything wrong. If somebody didn't do anything wrong, why is not Enron right now worth $100 a share? And it would probably go for what, 10 cents, 15 cents a share. And that is my plea, you know, as hard as we worked. In other words, it was one of the greatest achievements in my life when I retired, knowing that I helped build the 7th largest corporation in the United States. I was very proud of my company, you know, and really I'm still proud of Enron. 99.5% of the people that work for Enron are good people. They're hardworking, tax-paying, vote-toting people that, you know, just regular common folks. And it's a shame that the little minority at the top of our list or whatever it might be has destroyed such a great corporation, you know. And to me, that is a shame. And I thought we had some protection on different agencies, even at the federal level. I thought that we had some protection against things like that. But I find out that I was wrong on it, because the problems that occurred with the bookkeeping or whatever the problem might have been with Enron should have been taken care of in 1997, not no 2001. Because if it would have been taken care of in 1997, I firmly believe that Enron would still be going strong today. And that, but you know, there is so many ways that people can look at it, but really and truly for us, and I feel like I'm speaking for all of the retirees, all of the ex-employees and the employees that work for Enron now that lost everything they had and lost their 401ks and their ESOPs, and also the ones that got laid off and didn't get the right servants pay and first one thing another like that. In other words, this is not the American way. To put it real blunt and plain, this is not the American way for things like that to happen and for people to let things like this happen. So I would like just to take a look at what the down the road looks for me. Down the road looks real grim, real slim, you know. Pray that things get better. I hope and pray that my health holds up. If my health would hold up and I was a young person, I promise you, it wouldn't be no problem. I'd be out working somewhere, you know. But I can't. I have a heart condition and stuff, you know, so I'm kind of at the mercy of the world, put it so to speak. But I really appreciate y'all listening to me, and I'm honored to be here.
Mr. Presswood, what do they call you? Charles, Chuck,
Charlie.
Charlie, when you were a young man, did you ever think the day would come that you would know what a 401k was, or any of that kind of stuff? Did you ever?
No, sir, I sure didn't.
Did you feel pretty good about knowing that stuff when you got to know it? I mean,
yes, sir, I did. You know, and for several years, my latter years with Enron, I didn't save any money, but I was always raised to save what you got. Don't spend it. Don't draw your money out and buy that new car get one like your neighbor's got or something. Keep it there. Let it grow. You know, just put it, what little bit you can save, put it in there and forget it, you know. Well, I forgot
Charlie, when you
mine.
were a kid,
Sir?
what made you more angry? The guy who, what would upset you more? The guy who came up to you and you knew wasn't your friend and tried to take you on? Or the guy who you thought was your friend and you found out when the fight started he was on the other guy's side? Who are you more angry with?
The second guy.
That's right.
The one that
And
I thought was my friend, you
He
know.
took advantage of you, didn't he?
Yes, sir.
I think there's one old, there's a 1,000 old expressions that I think every legislator should understand here, because they know it in their heart too. That the piece of this, I'm going to make an analogy for you to something I spent a lot of my life working on, and that is how women are victimized by violence. You know, I had a whole bunch of psychiatrists come and testify over the years here and tell me, because men say sometimes, well, why, if a woman is raped, doesn't she report it, or why can't she recover from it, or whatever. And all these experts came, and whether they were liberal, conservative, whatever they were, and they said one thing. They said, a woman who is taken advantage of walking down the street and somebody jumps out of a blind alley and drags her in and abuses her, she's scarred, and that's real bad. But she can recover psychologically, mentally, with a little help. But the woman who gets in a car with somebody she's known for 20 years, with somebody she works with the husband of her friend, or a guy that she voluntarily agreed to go out on a date, and he does something really bad to her, takes her a lot longer to recover, because she ends up blaming herself. She says, why didn't I know? At least that's all the psychiatrists tell me. All the experts tell me. And one of the things that seems to me, Charlie, I grew up with guys like you, which is what I'm proud of.
Amen.
Guys who busted their neck and thought just kind of fair play. Just fair play. And the one thing, if you wanted to get the guys in Claymont, Delaware, which is a little steel town, you want to get them up, you just take advantage of them. Suck them in. Get them to trust you and then violate that trust. Well, baby, then you had a problem.
That's right.
Because that is the ultimate sin where you and I come from. The ultimate sin is to lie to me. Pretend you're my friend, lie to me, and take advantage of me.
That's right.
Because what happens when it's all over is I blame myself. Why didn't I know better? Why did I do this? I could have. You lay in bed at night now wondering why you didn't take that money out of that account now, right? Right? I mean, now you wish you'd taken that money out 5 years ago, whether you bought that car or not, done something with it, bought some land, right?
Well, yes, sir. But I don't know. I'm from the old school, and I still trust people. The reason I didn't take mine out is honesty. Is the reason I didn't is I trusted Enron.
That's right.
I had full confidence in them. And then I also trusted the Wall Street people. In other words, I looked at that little computer every day. And when that Enron ship was 100 foot underwater, the analysts were still hollering, screaming, strong buy, And it's 100 foot underwater. Now, that tells me something now that I've,
Where
what
they
I'm at.
belong, 100 foot underwater. Well,
And-
I just think it's important that we understand this, that this is not a minor thing. This is not something. Have you ever been robbed? Have you ever been anybody? I don't know anybody your size probably try to fool with you when you're younger. But have you ever been robbed, or your car stolen, or your house broken into?
No, sir. I've been fortunate, very fortunate. Thank God for
Well,
that.
when that happens to you, unless you're wandering someplace you think you shouldn't have been, you usually don't go home. You go home mad. You don't go home wondering, why did I let that happen, usually.
That's right.
Or if you come home and your house is burglarized, it's like you're mad, but man, when you walk in and you give somebody, you say, hey, man, I'll give you a ride. I'll help you out. And then he takes your car. That's a real problem. Right?
Yes, sir.
Well, okay. I'll come back to you if I can, Charlie. Ms. Farmer, I'd like to hear what you have to say, if I could. And thank you for pulling, as Strom Sermon says, pulling that machine up close.
I learned fast.
I can tell.
I do appreciate the opportunity to be here before this committee. And I'm a very proud woman. And it is with extreme emotional difficulty that I come here today and to share my financial plight and my personal problems. But I feel compelled to explain my situation to you. And in doing so, I truly hope to be the voice of all Enron employees. I once had $700,000 in my 401k savings plan, and that was in late 2000. After years of hard work and dedication, I had achieved my life's dream. Enough money to retire comfortably, live independently, and financially secure. And it was part of my dream to leave my children and grandchildren a respectable inheritance to enrich their lives. For all of those years, I faithfully put money into my savings plan, and I fiercely protected it, never touching my savings no matter what hardship came along. In 1994, Enron had discontinued their formal retirement program, and they made each employee responsible for their own retirement planning. And I still tenaciously hung to my dream and worked toward it. And then in 2001, at the most critical time, Enron denied employees access to our own money. The shrewdly scheduled lockdown of the 401k denied other employees and myself access to our money for weeks, and this was just prior to the collapse of the 7th largest corporation in the United States. While company executives managed to sell stock worth millions, we employees, we were brutally forced to watch helplessly while the 401k lost $1.3 billion in value. As I understand it, the plan administrators had the opportunity to either lift or even postpone this lockdown, and they chose not to. I feel it's very clear that employees were not only victimized by Enron executives, we were sacrificed for their own personal gain. And what had taken me a lifetime to build was destroyed in only a matter of days. When the lockdown finally lifted and I was allowed access to sell my stock, I received a check for $20,418, and that's all that was left. And I'm now 61 years old. I won't have the opportunity to recoup my losses. I suffer from degenerative arthritis of the spine, along with 3 ruptured discs. I am diabetic, and that has caused neuropathy of the lower extremities. And I also have plantar fasciitis, which is like having constant muscle cramps on the soles of both feet. And it's really painful, and it's disabling. And I try to get by now on Social Security survivors benefits, which is only about $500 a month. And that's after health insurance and medical prescription cost. But out of that $500, I also have to pay my car, house insurance, and my property taxes. And whatever will I do if I ever get sick or if anything breaks down? I don't know. I'm afraid of my electric bill now. At night, I sit home in the dark. And I use no heat during the wintertime, and I don't allow myself to use air conditioning. The lowest I've been able to get my bill down to is $51. And in a lot of other ways that I save now, I stopped the newspaper delivery, and I was really glad when I got a $33 refund on that, because that's now a week's worth of groceries. I stopped my yard service, and I try to do it myself on good days. I cut my telephone and other household services to the very minimum. And I don't shop at Publix anymore, or nice department stores. I shop at discount food stores and thrift shops. And I don't mean to give the impression that I'm too good for this or above any of it, But this is not what retirement was supposed to be like. And it's certainly not what Enron had touted to its employees all those years. We were lied to about the financial condition of our company and the future of our company. They told us everything was great, never better. But those lies, they were all part of the sham.
Another one.
And Enron had become a house of cards. And the people that knew it, they protected only themselves. They took more than my money and my dream. They destroyed my pride in my whole career. I am totally ashamed that I worked for Enron. And the emotional toll on myself and my family, it defies description. And the strength and the support from my children and my close friends has been invaluable. I don't know, the executives, even this long after their criminal behavior, they go scot-free. They're living their normal lives of luxury. They in no way have negatively been affected by their illegal actions. And the amount of money they took from me surely was 1% or less of what they already had. And they took my money anyway. And to me, what a blatant and enormous testimony to corporate greed. And when does it stop? And if this is the way corporate America repays dedication and loyalty, how many millions do they need to feel secure? We employees, average Americans, we trusted in the system. We played by the rules. And we were lied to and cheated not only by Enron, but also the auditors and the Wall Street analysts. We've done nothing wrong. But yet we suffer the greatest pain and we suffer the greatest losses. If the collapse of Enron does not show that employees' needs and lives are being swept under the carpet as mere inconveniences, what will it take? It is my deepest hope and prayer that this Judiciary Committee can give us assistance in getting back what is rightfully ours. Give us retribution. Make us whole again. Give us protection. Put into place measures that will help prevent such rampant white-collar crime. Make the punishment more appropriately severe and swift. I truly appreciate the opportunity to participate in this victim impact panel and to make my plea to you for justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Farmer, for a very moving statement. Sorry, did your son want to, did you have a statement to make? You're welcome to if you'd like.
Sir, I did not prepare anything for the committee. I'm solely here for moral support, although I would like to add this morning, while we were three sitting at breakfast and listening to Mr. Presswood, I had a one-way view of the situation that the retirees were in from Enron, namely from my mother's situation. But listening to Mr. Presswood, I realized, and as we talked, I realized how many thousands more people than affected just from the Enron employees, their families, the children of their families, everybody down the row. I understand that it's my responsibility as a son to take care of my mother. The burden falls on my shoulders and my sister's shoulders as she gets on in years and needs our help. It would have been a whole lot easier if Enron had taken care of their employees like they should have. And I think at this point, although I'm willing to accept the complete responsibility of that, I think Enron should, or anyone in this situation, any company that should do this to their employees should help with the responsibility.
You know, there's an old expression. You can lock your front door to keep the burglar out, but you can't lock your heart to keep the liar out. Ms. Farmer,
Yes, sir.
your son and your daughter are, quote, prepared to take care of you. Why is that? Does that bother you?
Yes, sir, it does.
Why does it bother you?
Because I've always been independent. I've been a single woman since the mid-1970s. And I've always taken care of myself, and it's always been of utmost importance that I maintain that capability to be their support. And now it's like Charles said, it's turned 180 degrees. I'm now dependent on them. They come down for Christmas dinner, they bring food. It's not supposed to be like that. And everything I've worked for all my life, it's gone.
I think that's an important point to make here because my dad's been a hard-working guy his whole life. He's 87 years old and never worked for a company where they had a pension plan. And one that did, they lost it before we had protection for pension plans. I'm not alleging fraud or anything, just the company went under. And my dad and mom have their house. A long time ago, I authored a bill called the reverse mortgage, which allows an elderly person to be able to get a mortgage and get X number of dollars a month to help them sustain themselves, live in their house as long as they are alive, and when they pass away, the house is sold, and whatever the money that was gotten to help them live is taken out of the proceeds of the house. My mom and dad have 4 kids. My brothers and my sister, unlike me, have been very successful. And so my mom and dad are in a position where they have sort of reinsurance in their children. And my dad's in pretty tough shape now physically, and so they're living with me. But they still have their home because they're going through this fiction. They're going to move back into their home. And I said, my mom came to me very upset that this reverse mortgage, honey, is using up too much of the value of my house. And I said, Mom, it's okay. So what? She said, I'll have nothing to leave you. I'll have nothing to leave you. My mother's 85 years old. My mother doesn't want to take $500 a month out of her house to supplement her Social Security because she's not going to have anything to leave me. I hope when we think about penalties, we think about consequences to people. Now, my mom's situation is different. Same impact, the pride piece. But I'm not suggesting any wrongdoing relative to anything happened to my mother or father. But I think sometimes we forget. You raised us to be proud.
That's right.
You raised us to be independent. And I'm not very far behind you, by the way, in age, so it's not like we're a different generation here. But at any rate, Mr. Deputy, tell me about the deal down at Medicam. How did you lose some of your retirement? How did that happen? Because you're a pretty young guy. How old are you?
I'm 35.
35 years old.
Yes, sir.
And my staff tells me you lost a chunk of your retirement.
Yes.
How'd that happen?
They filed for taxes, like a tax extension, and they said by law they could, and then they closed the plant.
Now, what were they supposed to do? By the way, I understand you just got off work.
Yes,
you got
sir.
on at 6 o'clock and you hopped on a train?
Yes, sir.
Now, I hopped in the early train too, but I didn't work until 6 o'clock this morning.
Yes, sir.
So obviously you feel pretty strongly you're down here. If you worked all night and you're on a train at 6 o'clock in the morning to come down here, at 7 o'clock to get down here. Let me make sure I understand. How's your retirement system work at Medicam?
Once a year they would make their deposit when they did their taxes.
And so when they did their taxes, what they would do is the money you kicked in and the money that they had promised they were going to put into this pension fund, right?
Yes, sir.
That they would put in at the time they paid their taxes, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, am I correct that Medicam made a yearly payment, supposedly, of 6% of your annual salary into an investment plan of your choosing, right?
Yes.
So if your salary was $6,000, or if it was $1,000, they paid 6% into a fund, and they paid $60. Is that right? 6%.
Yes, sir.
$60 into into a fund. Now this year, how much were they supposed to pay for you? Do you know into this fund when they paid their taxes?
It's roughly like $3,000.
$3,000. So, and that was for you and all the other employees, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, what'd they tell you? Did they put that money in for this year?
No, sir. We're the first 4 months of this year.
Yeah. So for 16 months, they didn't put any money in. But how? I mean, did they ask? Did you? Is that right? For 16 months, they didn't put any money in.
No, sir.
But when did you know they weren't putting the money into the fund?
They gave us a letter right at tax time, and that's when they told us.
And what'd they tell you?
It was legal. That's about it.
And so, if I got it straight now, you were supposed to have $3,000 deposited in your retirement account, the one that the investment plan that you had chosen, right?
Yes.
And it was supposed to take place when they paid their taxes. Tax time come, they didn't put it in, right?
Yeah, they filed for an extension.
They filed for an extension.
Right.
And then what'd they do?
Then they filed for bankruptcy.
So obviously, you're kind of in the back of the line then now, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Took everybody's vacation, too, that you'd earned from the previous year.
Now, it's my understanding that this once-a-year payment was made around the 15th of each year for the prior calendar year. For example, in 2001, Medichem made its employee contribution for the calendar year 2000. And that's how it worked until this year. And this year, Medichem didn't make an annual pension payment for calendar 2001. And I understand that the 2001 payment for union employees was about $140,000 they were supposed to pay in for your
Yes,
union,
sir.
right? For both union and non-union employees, about $300,000 they were supposed
Yes,
to pay
sir.
in, right? And they didn't pay any of that in.
No, sir.
And I understand that the specific 2001 pension payment, which Medichem was supposed to make into your account, was, they tell me, $2,688. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Now, I'm not aware of any evidence of fraud on Medchem's part, but I want to be clear about that. Nonetheless, am I correct? Is it correct, Mr. Deputy, that you and the other employees thought? What do you think about the timing of this? Maybe let me ask you that way.
It was just fishy.
It was fishy. Specifically, the company told you that it could not make its annual payment because it needed to fix its tax extension, right? That's
Yes,
why.
sir. Yes, sir.
It didn't tell you it didn't make it because they were fixing to declare bankruptcy, did they?
No, sir.
Yeah. Did you and the other employees believe, at least at the time, that Medichem refused to make the annual payment because they knew they were going bankrupt?
No, sir, because we thought we were owned by Charter Oaks.
Now, I don't have, again, any evidence of wrongdoing on the part of Medichem in terms of criminal wrongdoing. But I want to ask you a question about penalties for other companies who defraud pensions. I want to ask all of you this. Pensions are regulated by the federal statute known as ERISA, the Employee Retirement Income Security Act. If a criminal violation occurs under ERISA, however, the most the pension crook can get is 1 year in jail. That's the most they can get, is 1 year in jail, regardless of how much money is lost by the company's employees. And incredibly, it's possible this white-collar crime cook could even get probation if your life savings are gone forever. Now, that's under ERISA. Were you aware of that you could only get 1 year in jail?
No, sir.
No, sir.
And that the defendant could be actually get probation if they were convicted? Do you agree that, or let me ask you this, what do you think is fair? I mean, let's assume it was proven in a court of criminal law that you were defrauded. What kind of penalty do you think the people responsible for defrauding you should get? Yes, Mr. Charlie, what do you think?
Mr. Chairman, would you let me answer that in my
Sure
point
would.
of view? Lifetime with no parole.
All right.
They wouldn't be too many people frauding people then, you know. You set 2 or 3 examples, and the rest of them would take note of it. My way of thinking.
What do you think, Ms. Farmer? For real, I mean, how do you think it should be dealt with? I know, I know your instinct, your heart would say, hanging from the nearest tree kind of thing, but I guess, but if 1 year is not enough, how do you think? Let me give you an example. Interstate car theft. If you steal a car in federal law and you in interstate, take it across the state line, you get 10 years in jail. Auto theft is a serious crime and it should be dealt with severely. So here you got, if under ERISA someone was convicted for violating that law, criminal conviction, they get 1 year in jail. They steal your car and take it into Georgia, they're going to get up to 10 years.
To me, that makes no sense. I mean, there's no equilibrium there. It doesn't balance. And I tell you one thing, if they get more than 1 year in the penitentiary, that would be fine. But I just want what is mine. I want it back.
Mr. Deputy?
And they don't deserve to have it.
I think it should be the same penalty as like with a gun, a stiff penalty.
There's not a lot of distinction here if someone comes in and sticks a gun in your face and takes $3,000 of your money.
Yeah, you can't do anything about it. In the same way, when they sneak it out, you can't do anything about it.
Well, that's one of the things we got to look at here. I'm not trying to hype this, but I think it is important to just look at the kind of the equities here. I take your car and take it into New Jersey, and I take your car into Georgia, and take yours into Oklahoma. I don't know why I do that, but into Oklahoma. Only a Texan will fully appreciate that.
Especially if you've seen my car.
Especially if it's in your car. And no matter what your car is like, by the way, your car can be a 20-year-old jalopy or a brand new Mercedes, and there's no difference in terms of they cross that state line. It's 10 years. I want to thank you for taking the time to be here. I know it's not easy, but it's important. It's important we put a human face on what we're talking about here. We're not just talking about dollars. We're not just talking about in the abstract that people's futures are changed. We're talking about not only your money gone, but your pride is gone, and your sense of what you think your responsibility is to your children.
Yes, sir.
Is gone. And Charlie, here's a guy who, busted his neck, worked hard his whole life, and got things those college boys get. You out there, right? I mean, seriously, think about it. Think about it. It's a big deal. A big deal. It wasn't just the money, was it?
No, sir.
It was the knowledge that you built this and you were part of this deal. And did you ever think you'd be on a computer looking at stock prices? For Lord's sake, and quotes. When you were a kid, I didn't know what a computer was.
No, sir. I didn't even. The only stock I knew of was animals we had out in the barn.
That's right. Exactly right. And by the way, you couldn't afford to keep those animals right now based on what you got, right? Anyway, look. I promise you we're going to try to come up with an equitable way in which to deal with this, because in the bottom line, this has to be fair. And I want to tell you, I can think of not a whole lot other than your physical safety that I think we should value more than your financial security. The good news is for Howard that he's 33 years old. And he has a whole life ahead of him, and he's going to get a kick in the teeth from this, whether there's criminal activity or not, because of the bankruptcy. But I think he's going to be wiser for it and know what's going on. And I don't think it's a good thing for you, by the way. Every time something lousy happened in my life, people would say, with Bill's character, I'd say, I got enough character. I don't need any more character, okay? And I'm not suggesting you need any either. But in the case of our two witnesses, although they are not that old, for physical reasons and others, their options are limited in the last part here. And Charlie, and Janice, I don't know, to be blunt with you. I'm not sure there's anything we're going to be able to do to get you back your money. And that's another question. But I do think that we have to consider what you both said, that if there were adequate penalties, maybe these guys would have thought twice about what they did or didn't do when they were making these judgments, if in fact penalties are deterrents. And I think in this case they may very well be. So I thank you all. I invite you, if you have any closing comment any one of you would like to make, I'm happy to have it. And look, I know you got up early. You probably want to get going, but I say to both of you, my staff's available. Why don't you all come around and we'll arrange for you to, because you came a long way, unless you already have plans, we'll arrange for you to, eat in the Senate dining room or get you something to eat here. So, I mean, this has been a real sacrifice to come up just for an hour or so. So we'll take care of that if you can. I'm not saying the Senate will. I will. I want to make it clear. I'm not spending the taxpayers' money here, okay?
Thank you.
This is not the taxpayers' money, okay? And so we'll just make arrangements if you all need any while you're up, because I know it was an inconvenience. And Howard, I'll see you at home, but if you need anything while you're here too. So I'd invite you, if you have, you're welcome to come into this room. My staff will be over there if you need any assistance or would like any, or like us to arrange to make sure you get some lunch here, if that's okay.
Thank you. That's a generous offer.
All right. Well, thank you very much for being here. Yes, Charlie?
Mr. Chairman, I'm looking at that little chart up there, and you take that car that would cost about $30,000, and that criminal offenses over here could reach up to maybe $2.2 billion. There's a difference there. Something is wrong with the law or something, looks to me like.
Well, I think you're right, Charlie. We're going to try to fix that.
I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you. An honor to have you here. While our first panel is clearing out, I want to, and again, thank them for being here. Our second panel, let me get is James Comey. James B. Comey was recently appointed the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York. He attended the College of William & Mary and the University of Chicago Law School, and later clerked for Federal District Judge John M. Walker, Jr. in Manhattan. As Assistant U.S. Attorney in the office he now heads, he prosecutes members of the Gambino crime family. Before being appointed to his current position, he served as Assistant U.S. Attorney in Richmond, Virginia, where he earned praise as a prosecutor. As head of an office that handles an enormous amount of white-collar crime work, we look forward to his testimony today. And Glenn B. Gaynor III. Mr. Gaynor serves the West Virginia State Auditor and Chairman of the National White-Collar Crime Center. He's a trustee of the National Coalition for the Prevention of Economic Crime and chairs the Audit Committee of the West Virginia Investment Management Board. He is on the Executive Committee of the National Association of State Comptrollers and is Vice President of West Virginia Consolidated Public Retirement Board. Mr. Gaynor, welcome to Washington. Is Skolnick? Pronounced Skolnick. And Mr. Bradley W. Skolnick is a Securities Commissioner for the state of Indiana and Chairman of the Enforcement Division of the North American Securities Administrators Association, an organization over which he presided from September of 1999 to September 2000. Mr. Skolnick earned his bachelor's degree at Michigan State University in East Lansing and his law degree at the Indiana University School of Law in Bloomington. He began his legal career as a law clerk in the office of a prosecuting attorney in Michigan and went on to clerk for the Indiana Court of Appeals. And we look forward to his testimony as well. And Frank O. Bowman III. Frank O. Bowman is an associate professor of law at Indiana University School of Law in Indianapolis, where he teaches evidence, criminal law, and criminal procedure. Following his graduation from the Harvard Law School in 1979, Professor Bowman entered the U.S. Department of Justice as part of the Honor Graduate Program. He spent 3 years as a trial attorney in the Criminal Division in Washington. From 83 to 86, he was Deputy District Attorney in Denver, Colorado, and he also spent 3 years in private practice in Colorado. In 1989, Professor Bowman joined the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of Florida, where he's Deputy Chief of the Southern Criminal Division, specializing in complex white-collar crimes. In 95 and 96, he served as Special Counsel of the United States Sentencing Commission in Washington, D.C., And in 98 to 2001, he served as academic advisor of the Criminal Law Committee of the United States Judicial Conference. Welcome, Professor. And is it Rosenzweig? Well, I'm sorry, Rosenzweig. Yeah, obviously, it's Paul, you can call me Bidden if you'd like. Paul Rosenzweig is a senior legal research fellow of the Heritage Institute Center for Legal and Judicial Studies. He attended Haverford College in Pennsylvania, a great school, and the University of Chicago Law School, after which he clerked for the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. He worked for 7 years as part of the Justice Department's Environmental Crime Section, and then for a time as the Chief Investigative Counsel for the House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure. Most recently, he was Senior Litigation Counsel and Associate Independent Counsel under Kenneth Starr. We look forward to his presentations today as well. I thank you all for being here, and if you would begin and try to keep your statements relatively short. Your entire statement will be placed in the record, but if we begin in the order that I introduced you. Mr. Comey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for inviting me here today. I welcome the opportunity to appear before this subcommittee on behalf of the Department of Justice to discuss these important issues and the penalties for white-collar crime. As you have said, Mr. Chairman, the swift and certain punishment of financial crimes is essential to protecting this country's economy. The prosperity of our great country and all the good that flows from it are made possible by the federal, state, and local laws that bring a degree of order and predictability to commerce and that protect citizens from the predation of criminals who use a pen or a computer and not just a knife or a gun. But as you also know, the real and immediate prospect of significant periods of incarceration is necessary to give force to those laws. Nothing erodes the deterrent power of our laws and breeds contempt, frankly, for obeying the law more quickly than if certain criminals appear to receive punishment not according to the gravity of their offense, but according to their social or economic status. The Department of Justice is committed to the vigorous enforcement of laws against all forms of financial crime, and our position on this issue is straightforward and we hope inarguable. White-collar criminals have broken serious laws. They have done grave harm to real people like the real folks who were seated at this table before we sat down, and they should be subject to the same type of retribution that we accord all serious crimes, a significant chunk of jail time. We have made significant progress in recent years, especially in improving the federal sentencing guidelines. We are very pleased that the Sentencing Commission amended the guidelines for white-collar offenses to raise the penalties on those who are responsible for the significant financial loss, although the penalties were decreased to some extent for the smaller-time crooks. Both the Department and the Commission will be closely examining the effects of those recent amendments on cases that are just now being prosecuted and coming through our offices, and we will pay particular attention to what happens at the lower-end cases, which make up a large proportion of the cases prosecuted by U.S. attorneys. We remain concerned with amendment proposals that have been made to the Commission in past years that could undermine the progress that has been made so far. We're pleased that the Commission has seen fit to reject efforts to reduce punishment for the most serious offenders. White-collar offenders are generally better educated in the experience of U.S. attorneys and more sophisticated than most criminals. They commit their crimes not in a fit of passion or out of addiction or a craving, but with cold and careful calculation. They are, in my experience, the most rational of offenders and are more likely to weigh the risks against the anticipated rewards of committing a crime. They can be deterred, but the penalties must be certain and significant. They have to fear going to jail. If you ask a criminal defense attorney who represents a white-collar subject or white-collar defendant, they'll tell you the thing they are most afraid of is going to jail. People like that with a lot to lose are exquisitely sensitive to the pain of deterrence because they don't want to go to jail. The certainty of these significant penalties in white-collar cases also fosters trust in our criminal justice system, which is the bedrock of the system. If drug defendants and violent offenders are routinely sent away for long stretches while white-collar offenders routinely get probation or home confinement or a halfway house, people are going to start to think that felons with wealth or privilege or education or the right color collar are not held to the same standards as regular criminals, to put that in quotes, and that people are above the law. We believe that white-collar sentences to jail can and will lead to restitution to the victims of their crime. There's nothing inconsistent about a jail term with restitution. And lastly, I just want to add a word about downward departures. Because Congress intended the sentencing guidelines to cover nearly every factual circumstance in a criminal case, Judges are only rarely supposed to depart from the sentence range that the Commission has set out. We, U.S. attorneys, are very concerned about the increasing number of non-substantial distance departures in white-collar cases in particular. It sometimes appears that federal judges don't want to put white-collar defendants in jail and that they work to eliminate or reduce that jail time because of the defendant's civic work or charitable work or his great employment record or his big family or his health problems or a whole host of factors that the guidelines say are discouraged, but the judges find are present to a degree outside the heartland and therefore justifies sending this guy home or to community confinement. These departures are present or can be found by a good defense lawyer in almost every case, and we think they erode the even already less onerous penalties in the white-collar area. In conclusion, we think that white-collar offenses are situations where punishment and severity are vitally important as in the cases you mentioned, the drug and violent crime cases. We appreciate the work of the Sentencing Commission in bolstering the offense punishment for major offenders. We hope that the Commission will continue to stand strong against proposed changes that would undermine that progress. And we look forward to working with the Commission and this subcommittee to ensure that federal sentencing is designed to reduce crime in the most efficient possible way. That concludes my prepared remarks. Mr. Chairman, I ask that the full text of my remarks be incorporated into the record.
Without objection, they will be. Mr. Gaynor, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Biden, I come to you wearing two hats today. First, as the State Auditor of the State of West Virginia and its Commissioner of Securities, but also as the Chairman of the Board of Directors of the National White Collar Crime Center. I'm going to depart from my prepared remarks, since they will be included in the record, and just speak briefly
They will be.
to a few issues. As a regulator of the securities industry and as serving on the National White Collar Crime Center, I see firsthand many of the issues and problems that we're facing dealing with this issue. Too few resources. The National White Collar Crime Center, as you probably are aware, is funded by the Congress through the Department of Justice and Bureau of Justice Assistance. Though our funding is greater than it has ever been in the past, it is still too few dollars to meet the great needs that we're trying to achieve. We have over 1,000 member agencies representing attorney generals, securities commissioners, state police, state and local law enforcement, as well as prosecutors across this country. We try to provide them support not only in financial crimes training, prosecutors training, computer crimes training, but we also try to provide them research and analytical support. Our research section has found through our last nationwide study that most Americans view economic crime, or what we would consider white-collar crime, to be every bit as important and deserve equal time and prosecution as traditional street crime. Though we know from our past history that is not the case. We can look back to the 90s when we had the savings and loan scandal, where the average sentence for the folks involved in that, with in excess of $100,000, they received 36.4 months in jail. You've already used the example of the car theft. At that time, car theft received 38 months in jail. Traditional burglary received 55 months in jail, and drug offenders received over 64 months in jail. As we can see, the sentencing is not equal. Another area that we have identified, and I will say as a securities regulator, I find somewhat disheartening. The complexity of economic crime and the investigation required to do that takes an expertise that is difficult to find. When you do find that expertise, having the funds and the ability to maintain that staff is difficult. But even farther disturbing is when you do put a case together, and you are successful in putting a case together, taking it to the federal prosecutors, many times it falls on deaf ears. Not criticizing the system, I understand the system. I understand the burden and the crimes that they're trying to deal with. Many times, white-collar crime is looked at as a low priority from the standpoint of sentencing. Why would a prosecutor want to put in thousands of hours into a case only to get a conviction of perhaps parole or maybe a few months in jail? I can understand their situation, but as a regulator, I find it difficult to deal with on a day-to-day basis. I have to answer, as do you, to my constituencies in the state of West Virginia. And that is an area that if we have federal leadership in strengthening the laws, I believe that it will go a long way in helping to prevent economic crime in this country. We must take a strong stand. Not only do economic crime criminals in this country need to understand that they're going to be prosecuted, but there will be severe penalties for that violation of the law. Many of them right now in the environment that we exist in, they're willing to take the gamble that if they are caught, they will not be convicted, or if they are convicted, they will probably receive probationary or a very light prison sentence. This is truly an issue that we must deal with and has been already talked about by the previous panel. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Skolnick.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm Brad Skolnick, Indiana Securities Commissioner and Chairman of the Enforcement Section of the North American Securities Administrators Association. I commend you for holding this hearing today, and thank you for the opportunity to appear. Our country has undergone an historic transformation. In just the past generation, we have become a nation of shareholders. Today, half of all households are invested in the stock market, and state securities regulators realize we have an increased responsibility to make sure that Wall Street is a safe street for Main Street investors. Given all the news of late, which sometimes makes the business pages read like the police blotter, Congress, regulators, and the industry must act to restore confidence in the integrity of our markets, and we feel we can help do that by holding those who defraud investors accountable for their crimes. The strongest deterrent to white-collar crime, I believe, as we've heard today, is criminal prosecution and prison time. But there are significant hurdles we face. Prosecutors, juries, and the media understand street crime like robbery, assault, and murder. Somehow securities fraud and other white-collar crimes seem sanitized, bloodless, and technical. Many people, including some in law enforcement, view securities fraud as an essentially victimless crime that involves as much gullibility on the part of the victim as it does culpability on the part of the perpetrator. But we know white-collar crimes aren't victimless crimes. Just like street crime, securities fraud ruins lives, destroys families, steals hopes, and kills dreams. Oftentimes, when faced with a problem, the temptation is to propose new legislation. In my opinion, to protect investors, we need to make better use of the laws already on the books. This means bringing more criminal actions against white-collar crooks. One problem is that securities cases are complex, costly, and time-consuming. And these are serious deterrents to law enforcement agencies with limited personnel and budgets. The prosecution of complex white-collar criminal cases take time and money, lots of money. It's critical that prosecutors and law enforcement officials be provided with the resources necessary to investigate and prosecute these cases. The truth is, some prosecutors shy away from them because the subject is complicated and difficult to understand. A prosecutor's willingness to undertake a complicated and technical securities case also depends on other cases competing for attention. Murders, other forms of violent crime, and drug-related cases are sometimes easier to argue to a jury and don't require the amount of staffing or special expertise often required for a criminal prosecution of a complex securities case. But from my perspective as a state securities regulator, white-collar criminals who commit securities fraud deserve prison time, just like thieves, muggers, and murderers. There are some ways where my colleagues can help. State securities regulators can and do provide resources to prosecutors to assist with the investigation and prosecution of these cases. We can develop cases fully and hand them over to prosecutors, both federal and state, reducing the burden on them substantially. Moreover, when criminal convictions are obtained in white-collar cases, the sentences imposed are often insufficiently severe, considering the amount of harm inflicted. Think about it. Someone steals your car, they go to prison. Some con artist steals the money your parents needed for retirement, they get fined. That's just not right. I also think it is important for us to stop using euphemisms when we talk about white-collar crime. White-collar criminals are cold, calculating, and vicious. All too many are serial violators, career criminals. It's time, well, it's probably way past time, we called a crook and put more of them in jail. On the legislative front, state securities regulators support S. 2010, the Corporate and Criminal Fraud Accountability Act of 2002, and believe it sends a powerful message that wrongdoers in the securities markets will be punished. Unfortunately, white-collar crime is not as high on our national agenda as it needs to be. However, the problems in this area can be successfully addressed if law enforcement officials, regulators, Congress, and others work together on solutions. I'm optimistic that the battle against white-collar crime is winnable, given the will and the right amount of resources. Again, I thank you for holding this hearing and would be pleased to provide any additional information you may need.
Thank you, Commissioner. Professor?
Chairman Biden, thank you very much for inviting me to be with you here today. My name is Frank Bowman, and I am professor at the Indiana University School of Law in Indianapolis. As you were kind enough to mention, before becoming a teacher, I practiced law for a good 17 years and served for roughly 13 years as a prosecutor in state and federal courts. In 1995 and 1996, I was detailed by the Department of Justice to serve as special counsel to the U.S. Sentencing Commission, and during that detail, I became involved in the Commission's long project of rethinking and revising the sentencing guidelines governing economic crimes, a project which finally came to fruition in May of 2001 when the Commission passed its so-called economic crime package of guidelines amendments. When I left the government to teach in 1996, I began to write about sentencing, and in particular about the sentencing of federal economic crimes. And I continued to work in the political realm and in the policy realm on economic crime sentencing reform. During the 5-year process of rewriting the federal economic crime sentencing guidelines, I had the honor to work closely with all of the groups most interested in the reform, former colleagues in the Justice Department, representatives of the Defense Bar, the Criminal Law Committee of the U.S. Judicial Conference, and of course the Sentencing Commission itself. The lessons I learned during the last 5 years inform much of what I have to say this morning. The question for today is whether we are tough enough on white-collar crime. I want to make 4 points. First, the average sentence imposed on a defendant convicted of an economic crime defined broadly in federal court is certainly significantly lower than the average sentence in any other major crime category. And economic crime defendants, broadly defined, get probation far more than any other sort of defendant. I've included in my written testimony a chart which reflects the precise figures for fiscal year 2000. However, I want to emphasize that I think this comparison of categories is probably misleading. Most federal prosecutions categorized as economic crimes are simple crimes that involve relatively small sums of money. For example, in 1999, half the defendants sentenced for theft crimes and 22% of those sentenced for fraud stole less than $10,000. That's not a minor amount of money, but in the scheme of the kinds of frauds that we've been discussing this morning, it's relatively small. Moreover, a big chunk of federal economic crime caseload consists of thefts or misappropriations of government benefit checks, thefts of government property, simple embezzlements from federally insured banks, and similar matters. Prosecution of these kinds of cases is certainly necessary, particularly with the government itself, and thus the taxpayer becomes the victim. But there, I think, is little evidence that crimes of this sort are underpunished. Therefore, I think that sentencing averages for all federal economic crimes don't tell us very much about the appropriateness of the punishments imposed on the kind of folks that you, Senator, are presumably thinking about when you scheduled this hearing. People I'll call serious white-collar offenders, people who stole a whole lot of money in a reasonably complicated way. Now, the second point I want to make is an historical one, and that is across the board, for both routine small fry types of thieves and for serious white-collar offenders, federal economic crime penalties are now markedly higher than they used to be. Prior to the enactment of the federal sentencing guidelines in 1987, probationary sentences were the norm in federal economic crime cases, often in serious white-collar cases involving significant financial losses. The original Sentencing Commission consciously sought to change this. They wrote guidelines that effectively mandated prison sentences, absent departures at least, for all defendants who stole more than roughly $120,000 or so. And in addition, by tying increases in sentence length to increased amounts of loss, and by adding sentencing enhancements for factors like abuse of trust, the guidelines began routinely generating multi-year prison sentences for white-collar defendants who before the guidelines would have escaped with probation or a term of mere months.
I might add, that was one of the reasons why I wrote the legislation. Everybody thinks it was only the violent criminals, but we had a lot of hearings. That was one of the big issues back then.
And Senator, although many people are not great fans of the guidelines. I, for one, am, and I want to thank you and for your good work in helping
I
create that
didn't
institution.
intervene for that, but thank you.
I want to go on to say that even though the guidelines raise the historical level of white-collar offenses, in the years after the guidelines are adopted, many judges, probation officers, and prosecutors felt that sentences for serious white-collar offenders are still not, or were still not, high enough. And as a result, one element of the Sentencing Commission's 2001 economic crime package was an increase in sentences in cases with larger loss amounts. So the effect of the guidelines on white-collar criminals has been to put more of them in prison for longer. And the effect of the new 2001 economic crime amendments to the guidelines will be, I think, to increase white-collar sentences still more, at least for high-loss cases. And therefore, another way of framing the question being asked here this morning might be, we've gotten tougher on white-collar crime, yes, but have we gone far enough? Now, of course, there's no objective or empirical way of deciding how much punishment is enough. For example, in my own view, comparisons to other dissimilar types of crime may not be very helpful. People often remark on the substantial difference between economic crime sentences and drug sentences. But one has to ask whether the lesson to be drawn from this comparison is that economic crime sentences are too low, or maybe that drug sentences are too high. Or maybe that the differential is just right because they're not comparable types of crime. I think about the best we can do is to make some necessarily imprecise judgments about whether prevailing punishment levels are likely to act as effective deterrents to crime, while at the same time being neither undeservedly lenient or undeservedly harsh. In my written testimony, I provided some examples of the sentences that both the old and new guidelines would produce for some hypothetical white-collar criminals who steal sums in the range of, say, $750,000 to $1 million or $2 million. Now, depending on the particular circumstances in such cases, other than loss amount,